My name is Marianne Holt, and the night my daughter humiliated me in front of 18 strangers began with a single sentence that sliced through the candlelit air, sharper than any knife in the room. The restaurant glowed with warm amber light, the kind meant to make everything seem softer and more forgiving. But nothing could cushion the impact when Ava rose from her chair, lifted her champagne glass, and turned every head toward me. "Mom," she said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "will that be Cashman or installments for the $30,000 dinner?" Her words echoed across the long, polished table, ricocheting off crystal glasses and plates rimmed with gold. Conversations stopped mid-breath. A hush spread so quickly I could almost hear my own heartbeat stumbling inside my chest. 18 faces, Liam's family, his relatives, his colleagues, turned toward me with a mix of curiosity and discomfort, as if they had unknowingly bought front-row seats to a show they never asked to watch. I felt the room tilt slightly as I reached for my purse out of instinct, not hope. The soft leather strap brushed my fingers, worn and thinned from years of use. I already knew what was inside. $83, carefully folded, meant to stretch another 12 days until my next pension deposit, but under the weight of every stare, even that small sum felt like a confession of everything I lacked. Ava watched me with a smile crafted perfectly for her audience, but beneath that shine, I recognized something cold, something deliberate. As my trembling hands opened my wallet, I understood that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment gone wrong. My daughter had brought me here to expose me, and the worst part was realizing she'd planned it. 4 days before that humiliating night, I was sitting alone in my small apartment, watching the late afternoon light fade across the walls that never seemed to dry completely, no matter how often the building manager promised to fix the leak. The air smelled faintly of old paint and the lavender detergent I used to keep my clothes from carrying the scent of dampness. I was knitting slowly, letting the rhythm distract me from the quiet that always felt heavier after sunset. When my phone vibrated on the table beside me, Ava's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I didn't move. It was strange how a single name could bring both warmth and dread, how it could make my hands tremble even before I answered. We hadn't spoken properly in months, not since she visited last year and walked through my apartment with the same expression someone might use entering a motel they didn't trust. She'd looked at the peeling corners of wallpaper, the old couch with the sunken middle, and the tiny kitchen where the microwave sat atop the fridge because there was no counter space. Then she told me, with a smile that cut deeper than any criticism, "Mom, you really need a better place. A better place." As if I hadn't tried, as if trying were enough. Still. I picked up the phone. Her voice came bright and warm, like sunlight through a window you keep forgetting is actually cold glass. She told me she and Liam were having a small dinner with his parents that weekend. "Just us," she said. "Nothing formal. I really want you there. Mom, it's important." Important. That word lingered in the air even after the call ended. I sat there for a long time, staring at my hands, wondering what had changed. Maybe she missed me. Maybe she realized how distant things had become. Maybe she wanted to fix what had been slipping between us for years. Hope was a dangerous thing at my age, fragile as thread but still capable of tightening around your heart. The morning of the dinner, I woke earlier than usual. The city outside was still quiet, the kind of quiet that made you feel like you were the only person awake. I made myself a cup of instant coffee, weak but warm, and stood by the window as the sun climbed over the buildings. I tried to shake away the nervousness in my chest. This was just dinner, I told myself, just a meal with my daughter. But part of me wanted it to be more than that. I spent almost an hour getting ready. I chose my blue flowered dress, the one I kept carefully pressed even though it had been bought secondhand years ago. The fabric was thinning at the waist, but the color still brought out what was left of the youth in my face. I brushed my hair until it lay neatly across my shoulders and put on the small pearl earrings my mother had given me before she passed. They were the nicest things I owned. Wearing them made me feel less invisible. Before leaving, I checked my purse, my wallet, my ID, a small pack of tissues, and the $83 I had left to last me until my next pension payment. I folded the bills carefully so they wouldn't crumple more than they already had. I locked my apartment door behind me and walked down the dim hallway. The broken ceiling light flickered once, then steadied. And for some reason, that tiny flicker made me feel hopeful, like maybe the night would go smoothly after all. The cab ride to the restaurant took only 15 minutes, but the closer we got, the tighter my chest felt. When the driver pulled up to the entrance, I hesitated before stepping out. The place looked like something from a lifestyle magazine, tall windows glowing with warm light, polished brass handles on the doors, the faint sound of piano music drifting into the night. People stepped out of sleek cars wearing coats that looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe. I stood there for a moment, clutching my purse, reminding myself that Ava had invited me, that she wanted me there, that I wasn't intruding. Inside, the restaurant was even grander. Soft lighting made everything shimmer, glasses, mirrors, even the polished wood floors. A host approached immediately and asked for my name. When I told him I was with Ava Monroe, his posture straightened, his tone lightened, and he gestured for me to follow. It felt strange being guided with such formality, like I was a guest of someone much more important than me. As we walked deeper into the restaurant, my footsteps slowed. The atmosphere didn't match Ava's description of a simple little dinner. Nothing about this place was simple. Nothing was little. The people, the decor, the menu glimpses I caught on other tables. It was all bigger than anything in my world. And for the first time since leaving home, I felt a subtle, unsettling tug in my gut. Something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it yet, but the feeling sat there quietly, waiting. The host guided me through the dining room with a kind of polished efficiency that made me feel even more aware of the scuffs on my shoes. Each table we passed seemed filled with people who belonged there, people with confident posture and easy smiles, swirling wine in tall glasses as though it were simply part of breathing. The deeper we went, the more out of place I felt, like I'd stepped into a movie where everyone but me knew their lines. When we reached the back of the restaurant, my breath caught. A long table stretched beneath a cascade of soft golden light. Every seat was taken. 17 faces turned our way, each dressed elegantly in suits or shimmering dresses. And right at the center of it all stood Ava. For a second, she looked almost startled to see me, and for a foolish heartbeat I wondered if she hadn't expected me to show up. But then she smiled, the wide, bright smile she saved for public moments, and crossed the space between us with her arms outstretched. She hugged me lightly, barely touching my shoulders, then pulled away before I could return the embrace fully. "There you are, Mom," she said, as though I'd arrived late to a performance she was anxious to resume. "Everyone's been waiting." Waiting. The word lingered in the air like a misplaced note. She led me to the table, introducing me with a swift sweep of her hand. "This is my mother, Mary Ann." I tried to smile, but the moment I lowered myself into the chair they'd reserved for me, between two older relatives of Liam's who barely paused their conversation, I felt smaller than I had in years. The chatter around me continued as though my arrival hadn't changed anything. At first, I told myself it was normal. Big families always had their own rhythms. Maybe people were just nervous. But the longer I sat there, the more I could feel something deeper, a disconnect, a quiet but unmistakable distance. When the waiters came to take orders, no one asked me what I wanted. Ava answered for me each time, listing dishes I'd never heard of with a confidence that sent a prickle down my spine. It wasn't the confidence of someone who knew my tastes. It was the confidence of someone performing. "Mom will have the oysters," she said at one point. "She loves trying new things." I didn't. Oysters made my stomach twist. But the waiter wrote it down without a second glance, and I swallowed my discomfort with the same forced grace I used whenever life handed me something I hadn't asked for. Course after course arrived, oysters arranged like delicate art pieces, steaks thick and glistening, whole lobster tails dripping with golden butter, desserts that looked more like fragile sculptures than food. The wine flowed freely. Laughter rose and fell like a rehearsed chorus. Every time I looked at Ava, she seemed locked into a performance. Every gesture carefully measured, every laugh perfectly timed. I tried to ask her quietly why there were so many people, why she hadn't said anything about Liam inviting colleagues or extended family. But each time I leaned in, she brushed me off with a quick, "I'll explain later," her eyes never leaving the people around her. It felt like she was afraid to be seen talking to me for too long, afraid someone might notice something in me she wished they wouldn't. The conversations at the table drifted into topics I had no way to contribute to: stocks, property investments, plans for overseas vacations. I kept my hands folded in my lap, listening, nodding when appropriate, doing everything in my power not to look lost. The more I observed Ava, the more something inside me tightened. She seemed determined to fill every silence with stories of success, the promotions at Liam's firm, the new home they were planning to buy, the lavish honeymoon they were considering. She played the part of the polished, accomplished woman flawlessly. But every now and then, her gaze flicked toward me. And in those small glances, I sensed something I couldn't quite name at the time, like she was checking to see whether I fit into the picture she'd painted for these people, or whether I ruined it. The discomfort grew heavier with each passing minute. I noticed how she avoided talking about my life, how she never once mentioned what I did, where I lived, or even how I was. The omission was intentional. She'd carved out a version of herself for this room, and I didn't belong in it. At one point, while the waiter poured yet another bottle of wine, something so expensive he announced it like a special unveiling, I felt something in my chest twist. It wasn't jealousy. It was something closer to grief, a soft, aching awareness that my daughter had built a life where she felt I didn't fit. I considered leaving, quietly, politely, with an excuse about feeling tired. But the truth was, I didn't want to embarrass her. I kept telling myself the night would end soon, that maybe afterward she'd walk me to the door and explain everything, maybe even apologize for not preparing me. But as the hours passed, as laughter grew louder and plates piled high, I felt something colder settle inside me. Ava wasn't just distracted. She was waiting for something I couldn't see yet. And I didn't realize until much later that the entire evening, the crowd, the food, the wine, the way she avoided my eyes, had been leading toward the moment she'd been preparing from the start, the moment she would turn the entire room toward me and watch me crumble. Dessert had just been served when the heaviness in my chest finally became impossible to ignore. The delicate chocolate cake in front of me glistened under the candlelight, crowned with a thin sheet of gold, but my stomach was too tight to even consider a bite. The room around me buzzed with warm laughter and clinking glasses, but inside my own mind, there was only a growing, inexplicable unease. I reached for my purse, thinking I might quietly slip out before anyone noticed, when a waiter approached the table holding a small leather folder. He handled it with the kind of respect people reserve for something valuable, and for a moment I wondered which of the guests he would place it in front of. When he set it in front of Ava instead, some small part of me relaxed until Ava opened it. I saw it happen in her face first, a flicker, a shift. Then that bright, practiced smile appeared, blinding, theatrical, wrong. She rose to her feet, lifting her champagne glass and tapping it lightly with her spoon. The sound was crisp and sharp, and it sliced straight through the laughter at the table. Every conversation stopped. Heads turned. A hush rippled outward like a slow-moving wave. "Everyone," Ava said, glowing under the soft lights, "before we end this wonderful night, I want to thank the person who made it all possible." A strange chill crawled across my back. She couldn't mean me. She couldn't. But she turned, her polished smile landing squarely on me. "My mother," she announced. "She insisted on hosting this dinner." My heart dropped so fast it felt like it collided with my ribs. In one moment, 18 pairs of eyes swung toward me. I felt their surprise first, then their assumptions, then something even worse, pity. Ava walked toward me with slow, deliberate grace, carrying the leather folder like an offering. She placed it in front of me, folding her hands neatly as though presenting a gift. "So, Mom," she said brightly, "will that be cash or installments?" The words didn't make sense at first. They hung in the air, heavy and echoing. When my fingers finally found the strength to open the folder, the number inside stared back at me like a blow to the chest. $30,000. It didn't feel real. Not until my vision blurred, not until the heat rose from my neck to my ears. I reached into my purse out of instinct, not hope. My fingers brushed the worn edge of my wallet, thin, soft, frayed, and I felt something in me cave. I pulled it out slowly, aware of how silent the room had become. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were the same folded bills I'd counted earlier that day. $83, 12 days' worth of survival. I placed them on the table one by one. They looked embarrassingly small on the white linen. A few coins slipped from my hand and rolled lightly before settling near a spoon. The soft clinking sound echoed like a confession. Whispers began around us, quiet, unsure, uncomfortable. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else shifted in their chair. Ava's smile faltered for the first time all night. Her face stiffened, as though she hadn't expected reality to look quite like this. She glanced between me and the pathetic little pile of bills, and something uneasy flickered in her expression. Maybe embarrassment, maybe frustration, maybe both. I felt every breath in the room pressing against me, thick and suffocating. My throat tightened as I tried to speak, but no words formed. I wasn't just humiliated. I was cracked open, exposed, stripped bare under the warm glow of candles that suddenly felt far too bright. And as I sat there, trembling, staring at the money that revealed far more than I ever wanted anyone to know, one truth rose sharply inside me. Ava hadn't stumbled into this moment. She hadn't miscalculated. She had planned it. She wanted to watch me fall apart. She wanted them all to see how little I had. And the cruelest part was realizing she wasn't ashamed of what she'd done. She was ashamed of me. Before I could gather the crumpled bills from the table, a calm voice rose from the far end, steady, controlled, cutting cleanly through the discomfort settling over the room. "That's enough." It was Agnes Monroe, Liam's aunt. She rose slowly, her silver hair catching the candlelight as she walked toward us. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She simply moved with the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly when to intervene and exactly why she needed to. When she reached my side, she didn't look at the money, or the bill, or even me. Her eyes went straight to Ava. "Ava," she said evenly, "would you like to explain this?" Ava blinked too quickly, forcing a thin, brittle smile. "Aunt Agnes, it's fine. Mom offered. She insisted on hosting. She wanted to do something special." Agnes tilted her head gently, the way a teacher might when a child had been caught in a lie. "Interesting. Because when you invited us, you told me your mother had come into a small inheritance. You said she wanted to celebrate with the family." The air tightened. Conversations around us fell into an uneasy hush. Agnes turned to me. "Mrs. Holt, is that true?" I shook my head. No, I didn't know anything about an inheritance or a big dinner. I thought this was a small gathering. And just like that, the fragile shield Ava had wrapped herself in began to crack. Her breath quickened, her hands forming tight fists at her sides. "You all think I'm some kind of villain," she burst out. "Everyone wonders why I don't help her more, why I don't fix her life, but nobody knows what it's like. Nobody knows the pressure. You all just see an old woman who needs help and a daughter who doesn't do enough." Her voice trembled with anger, or maybe fear. "You don't know what it's like growing up with someone who never changes. Someone stuck in the same old place. I'm tired of pretending things were normal. I'm tired of feeling embarrassed." The word struck me harder than the humiliation of the bill. It wasn't the accusation. It was the truth inside her eyes. She truly believed she had outgrown me, and that doing so was her right. For a moment, the room felt unbearably still. Then Agnes spoke, softly but firmly. "Ava, the only embarrassment I see right now isn't your mother." The sentence hung in the air, heavy enough to bend it. Ava's face went pale. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked away from me for the first time that evening, as if my eyes had suddenly become too heavy to meet. I didn't know what to feel. Hurt, certainly. But beneath the hurt was something unexpected, a warmth rising from somewhere deep. A sense of someone finally standing beside me instead of judging me from afar. Agnes placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You don't need to stay here," she said quietly. "Let me take you home." I gathered my purse with slow, deliberate movements, trying not to let my hands tremble again. As I rose from the table, I felt the weight of 18 silent stares, not heavy this time, but strangely empty, like the judgment had shifted to someone else. Ava didn't follow me. She didn't call my name. She didn't even whisper goodbye. She simply stood there, frozen in the life she'd built, terrified it might crumble if anyone looked too closely at the foundation beneath it. Agnes guided me through the restaurant, her arm steady against mine, the warm lighting, the soft music, the polished reflections. None of it mattered anymore. Outside, the night air wrapped around me like something real, something honest, something I could finally breathe in. "You deserve better than what happened in there," Agnes said as we reached her car. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then the words slipped out on their own. "I don't know what I did wrong." Agnes opened the passenger door and looked at me with a kindness so unwavering it made my eyes sting. "You loved your daughter," she said, "and that was never wrong." It took weeks for the full weight of everything to settle, weeks filled with long talks, legal advice, and paperwork I never thought I'd have the courage to face. But I did. I faced all of it. And with Agnes and her nephew's help, I reclaimed what had been taken from me long before that dinner ever happened. Not money, but dignity. The day the final papers were signed, I stood outside the courthouse breathing in a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not victory, not triumph, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop apologizing for the life you lived and stop letting anyone rewrite the truth of it. And as I walked away, the evening sun touching my shoulders, I knew this clearly. My daughter had taken something from me that night at the restaurant, but I had taken something back, myself.